Hello everyone and welcome to this quick tutorial about creating items for the game. The creation process for some items is a bit more complicated than creating entities because of the weapon and armor material system that I have in the game. If you're creating a non-combat piece of clothing, then that's very simple. Just create a textured model and load it up into the item editor, no problem. But items of clothing like armor and weapons are a little bit trickier. In the game I have a material system for armor and weapons. This means that any piece of armor can be made from one of 10 different materials. For melee armor, these materials are all types of metal, for ranged armor they're all types of leather, and for mage armor they're all types of silk. So here in the game you can see this same piece of melee armor made from the 10 different metals. Weapons have 2 custom materials each, a primary material and a secondary material. And these are what the materials for each combat type are. So for example, you can see a few material combinations here for this broadsword, where the blade is made from the primary material and the handle is made from the secondary material. And for mage weapons, the gemstone is the primary material and the wooden stick is the secondary material, and for ranged weapons, the wood of the bow is the primary material and the bowstring is the secondary material. So, for example, if you're creating the texture for a piece of armor, you would just create it like normal, but leave any parts of the texture that you want to be made from the primary material completely colourless. You can still use grayscale to texture these parts, but the colour will be decided in game. Then you need to indicate which parts of the texture use the primary material by setting the alpha channel for these sections to be between 0.5 and 0.75. You can do this by editing a layer mask with a shade of grey between 50 and 75. Check out this video for more information about doing this. For weapons, you need to leave parts colourless for both the primary and secondary materials. Use an alpha channel value of between 0.5 and 0.75 again to indicate where the primary material should be rendered. So for a sword this will be the metal on the blade, and then use an alpha channel of between 0.25 and 0.5 to indicate where the secondary material should be rendered. So that's the gemstone for the handle. You also have to do the same thing when creating the item's icon, and I did a full video explaining exactly how you can do that, so have a watch of that if you're interested in creating icons for the armor and weapons. So that's the main thing that you need to know about making items, but apart from that, when you're making the model for items you'll need to model it onto the player's model, which you can download from the description of this video. And when you export the models, make sure that they are in the correct position on the player. Weapons, annoyingly, have to point right across his body because the top of his hand in this model is pointing that way, and the same for shields as well. For armor that covers more than one section of the player, you need to model each section of the armor separately. Each section of the armor must be a separate model and exported individually. But all of the sections of one piece of armor must use the same texture. So all 3 pieces of this top, for example, will all use the same texture. If you do want to help make some items, then you can have a look at the lists of items that you'll have received in the email when you received the dev kit. If you think up of something that's not on the list, then that's fine too. Just give me a bit of information about the item when you send it to me so that I know how it should be used in the game. Also, when you're working on a certain part of an item, do leave a comment in the relevant cell of the spreadsheet so that everyone else knows not to work on it. And by the way, all these cells with red mean that they haven't been done yet, and orange means that they're placeholders. You'll also notice that there are a lot of duplicate items, only with different styles. Each style of weapon and armor should be modeled differently, and you'll have received a text file in the email which explains the characteristics of each of these styles. So, when you're ready to create your item using the item editor, you first need to convert any OBJ models that you want to use, using the model converter tool. You'll also need to put any model textures that you want to use for items into the item textures folder in the repository folder in the dev kit, and you'll also need to put any icon files that you want to use into the icons folder. The editor itself is pretty easy to use. Just set the name, the ID, click here to choose an icon, choose the main category and the subcategory. Don't worry about the price, and you can set the description if you want. Choose the combat type and the style of the item, You can leave the stats for now, but click here to add a texture and set how shiny you want it to be. If you want to use a specular map or set some parts of the texture to glow, then click here and add an extra texture map. The red component of this extra texture map is the specular map, where higher values of red mean higher reflectivity, and the green component determines which part of the texture glows, with green values of over 0.5 indicating that the texture at that area glows. Don't worry about using the extra texture map if you're not sure what it does. To add the model, just add a section, choose the part of the body that the section of the item is attached to, and then choose the model, and do this for each section of the armor. And that's pretty much it. If you save the item, it gets saved into the items folder in the repository, and that's the file that you need to send to me. Please always also email me the actual model file as well, as a blend file or an OBJ file if you're not using Blender, so that I can edit the model in the future if necessary. And that is everything you need to know, so thanks a lot for watching, and I am very excited about putting all of your awesome items into the game.